So I'm Alex Thompson. I'm a consultant neurologist working in motor neuron disease. I'm also a researcher at the University of Oxford. My research focuses heavily on understanding why people develop ALS, particularly thinking about people who have a genetic predisposition to the disease. I lead a big study called ACORN, which is a national register of people living with genetic risk of MND, and a cohort study which studies those people in detail to really try and understand what determines the risk of MND, why it happens, when it happens, and how we could potentially change it and make it a preventable disease. So I mean, one of the key things about the type of work that we're doing to understand risk in genetic MND involves working with people with the disease. And you know, we know that can only really happen through partnership with people who are at risk, with families who've been affected by MND. And so FaTHoM is quite key to developing that and making sure that we keep focused on the questions that are important to the people affected by the disease, but also making sure that we're sharing the work that we're doing, what we're finding, the reason that we're doing it in the way that we're doing it, so that people who are impacted by the disease and genetic risk can come along with us and really understand alongside us what we think the important factors in terms of risk are. The overall, this sort of basically the big goal of the work that we do is about making MND a preventable condition, and alongside that, frontotemporal dementia, because we know that there's big genetic overlap between the two conditions, and a lot of families where MND is a feature will have FTD in them as well, depending on what the genetic predisposition is. Talking specifically about what I'm here to talk about really is primarily the ACORN study, which is a national cohort of people who either have C9orf72, the most common genetic risk for MND, and FTD, but also people who are closely related to people who know that they carry that gene. So these individuals will know that they're at 50% risk of carrying the gene, and with that, at increased risk of developing MND or FTD. In the next year, we're aiming to expand this study. So at the moment we've got 124 people enrolled, most of whom are people who are living with risk of the disease. We're aiming to expand it so that it doesn't focus purely on C9orf72. We're expanding it to the other genes that we know can cause motor neuron disease. Partly that is really so that we can try and understand what are the shared mechanisms across all of the genes that also probably will relate, will be relevant to non-genetic forms of MND, but also it will enable us to see what differs between the genes. Are there, do we need to look at this in a very precision way, targeting specific genes, or are there mechanisms that are happening at a kind of higher level that are relevant to everybody who's at risk of MND? So in addition to incorporating other risk genes, we're also going to be expanding to include some other sites, and we've developed this in a kind of hub and spoke model, so where we're going to have hubs in Sheffield and at University College London, and the idea beyond that, so that's what we're going to do initially, is expand to those two other sites. Beyond that, over the next year or several years, is to expand to probably smaller sites, which will see a smaller number of people, but that can bring in more data to give us a better geographic coverage of the UK. Because at the moment, where we are in the south, it means that we're skewed a bit towards the south, and we want to cover the population and the geography of the UK better. We acknowledge that actually it needs to be done in a kind of supranational way, internationally. So one of the other features of the study is we've tried to make it so that it's aligned really with other studies, so we can use the data as widely as possible in an anonymised way, so protecting people's data, but in a way where we can really maximise the power of what we've collected and what other studies researching the same area have collected. You know, there are studies going on in the US, elsewhere in Europe, in Australasia. In fact, there are now studies being developed in South America and other parts of the world. So in terms of the scientific work that we do, so you know, the key thing is we ask people to take part in this study, provide their samples and provide their data, but you know, the data can't just sit there, so we need to be actively learning from it as we acquire it. So there are a few different threads of that we're looking at. So some of that looks at what in addition to that genetic predisposition governs the risk that somebody will develop MND. So are there factors in their lifestyle? Are there other genes involved? So, you know, if you have multiple different genes together, does that also increase your risk? What's the effect of genes within a family? So we're looking at those things. We're also doing some work where we're looking at the period where people are living in healthy adult life before they develop MND, to try and understand what's going on in that period. So typically people will live for decades as an adult before developing MND, even when they have a genetic predisposition that's been with them from conception. And understanding what's going on in that period that enables the nervous system to tolerate having that abnormal gene there, but that it can develop and function completely normally, is really important to our understanding of the disease and why it happens. And actually, if we could, you know, if we knew what it was that allowed the body to tolerate that, if we could take that and sort of bottle it, that would be the beginnings of a treatment for the disease or a prevention for the disease. So that's a lot of what we focus on. That involves analysing samples, analysing scans, that we collect from people during the study.